For 10 years, she was my person. My emergency contact. The designated maid of honor in a wedding that hadn't been planned. The sister I never had. I trusted her with a depth that felt elemental, like a law of physics. It's funny, isn't it? How you can think you know someone's entire soul, every corner and shadow, and discover you were only ever looking at a reflection in a funhouse mirror. I would have taken a bullet for her. I would have donated a kidney. It never once occurred to me that she wouldn't do the same for me. But I was profoundly, devastatingly wrong. This is the story of how I discovered my best friend. My other half was systematically feeding my deepest secrets to the one person in the world she knew wanted to destroy me. But before I get into the crushing discovery and the confrontation that shattered my world, I have to take you back. You need to understand the architecture of our friendship, how meticulously it was built, how much I truly loved her. Only then can you understand the magnitude of the demolition. It all started during college orientation, one of those painfully awkward, mandatory icebreaker events. I was doing my best impression of a cool, detached loner sitting by myself and radiating an aura of, "Don't talk to me." Then this girl plops down in the seat next to me, and she had this explosive, unrestrained laugh that you just couldn't ignore. That was Chloe. Within 5 minutes, we were mercilessly mocking the orientation leader's trust fall exercise. By the end of the day, we had rearranged our entire freshman schedules to have as many classes together as possible. It was that instantaneous. It felt less like meeting someone new and more like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. Those first few years, we were a single, inseparable unit. We navigated the chaotic landscape of our early 20s, holding on to each other like life rafts. We shared a tiny, objectively terrible apartment where the plumbing was more of a suggestion than a reality. We subsisted on a diet of instant noodles and cheap wine, convinced we were living a glamorous bohemian life. We'd sprawl on the threadbare carpet, studying for finals until the words blurred, and we were delirious with sleep deprivation, quizzing each other and keeping one another awake. She was the one holding my hair back after my first real gut-wrenching heartbreak, whispering over and over again, "You are a goddess and he is a garden gnome." I was the one who coached her through her first major job interview, staying up until 3 a.m. playing the part of a terrifying CEO until she had an answer for every possible question. Our lives were not just parallel. They were completely interwoven. She wasn't just a friend. She was woven into the fabric of my family. My parents genuinely called her their other daughter, and my mom would send her care packages too. She was the first person I'd call with thrilling news, the only person who could accompany me to a scary doctor's appointment, and without saying a word, just sit there holding my hand. Her presence a silent promise that everything would be okay. The trust felt absolute, unshakable. We had this shared vault of secrets, and I believed it was hermetically sealed for eternity. I told her things I'd never uttered aloud to another living soul. My most debilitating insecurities, the messy, complicated drama with my family, the quiet, terrifying thoughts that keep you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. For 10 solid years, she gave me every single reason to trust her. She was my constant in a world of variables. Now, there's another character in this story. Her name is Megan. If my friendship with Chloe was sunlight and warmth, my history with Megan was a toxic, creeping mold. We had been bitter rivals since a cutthroat college internship where we were pitted against each other. She was the kind of person who seemed to derive genuine, unnerving pleasure from other people's failures. She would subtly spread rumors, take credit for my ideas in meetings, and deliver backhanded compliments that were crafted with surgical precision. She was this lingering shadow I could never quite shake because our career paths kept intersecting. Chloe knew every sordid detail of my history with Megan. She'd witnessed it firsthand. She always professed a visceral hatred for her. "She's a monster," she'd say with venom in her voice. "A social vampire who feeds on insecurity." Chloe was my self-appointed bodyguard against her. If we were at the same industry event, she'd literally, physically stand between me and Megan. A human shield. Her loyalty felt fierce, protective, absolute. It's grotesque, looking back. The very performance that made me feel so safe was actually just giving her a front row seat to all my vulnerabilities. For the longest time, things were perfect. But then, tiny, almost imperceptible things started to happen. Things so small you could easily convince yourself it was nothing, just your own anxiety playing tricks on you. The first time, it was just a single comment. I had been struggling with a massive new project at work, drowning in imposter syndrome. I confided in Chloe one night over a bottle of wine. "I just feel like I'm faking it until I make it," I admitted, the words tasting like shame. "And one day, everyone's going to find out I'm a total fraud." It was a raw, deeply vulnerable confession. 2 weeks later, I'm at a crowded networking event. And of course, Megan is there. She corners me by the bar and says, with that cloyingly sweet smile she has, "It's a tough industry. You just have to hope nobody finds out you're faking it." My blood ran cold. The exact words. Faking it. My mind started racing, trying to connect dots I didn't want to connect. How? How could she possibly know that specific phrase? But then a wave of denial washed over me. No, it's a coincidence, a common saying. It has to be. Chloe would never. She despises Megan. I scolded myself for being paranoid and pushed the sick feeling down. But then the second thing happened. My younger brother was going through a rough patch financially, and I was quietly helping him with his rent, a fact I was keeping very private. It was a stressful family matter. The only person I told, besides my parents, was Chloe. I just needed to vent to someone about the weight of it all. About a month later, I'm at a professional lunch with a group of colleagues, and Megan happens to be there. The conversation turns to family, and out of the blue, Megan looks across the table and says, "It's just so hard when you have to bail out family members who can't manage their own lives. You know? It must be such a drain." This time, it was like a physical blow. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a targeted strike. The only possible line from that deeply private secret to that public table ran directly through Chloe. My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt nauseous. I excused myself, went home and called Chloe, my voice trembling. I tried to play it cool. "Hey, the absolute weirdest thing just happened." And I recounted what Megan had said. I asked her, trying to sound casual, "You didn't, mention anything to anyone about my brother, did you?" Her reaction was an immediate defensive explosion. "Are you serious right now? Are you actually accusing me of betraying you? Me? After everything we've been through?" She twisted it so masterfully that she became the victim. She made me feel like a monster for even questioning her. She sounded so genuinely wounded that I was flooded with a tidal wave of guilt. How could I have accused my person? By the end of the call, I was the one apologizing profusely. I was comforting her. It was a masterful act of manipulation, and I fell for it completely. That manufactured guilt kept me silent for a long time. I started unconsciously holding things back from her, creating a small, protective distance I wasn't even aware of. Some deep, primal part of me knew something was fundamentally wrong, but my conscious brain just refused to go there. Acknowledging that Chloe could betray me meant that the last 10 years were a lie, and that reality was simply too catastrophic to face. The third time was the one that finally shattered my denial. I was a finalist for a huge promotion, a real game-changing opportunity that would alter the trajectory of my entire career. The process was highly confidential. I told Chloe everything. My strategy for the final interview, my anxieties, my hopes. I even told her about my single biggest fear, that a specific mistake I'd made on a minor project years ago would somehow come up and be held against me. She was the perfect supportive friend. "Don't even waste a second worrying about that," she promised. "You are going to kill it." A few days before my final interview, my phone rang. It was the hiring manager. His tone was off. He said he'd heard a disturbing rumor about my performance on that exact project I was worried about. He described a version of my mistake that was twisted and grotesquely exaggerated, painting me as reckless and incompetent. I just froze, speechless. I tried to defend myself, to explain the context, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. I didn't get the job. I was utterly devastated. And Chloe was right there, holding me as I cried, telling me how monstrously unfair it was. It had to be Megan, she seethed, her voice dripping with rage. She is the only one that pathetic and evil. And as I sat there, wrapped in her arms, a thought surfaced. And it was so cold and so awful it felt like swallowing glass. How could Megan have known about that specific project? More importantly, how could she have known it was the one thing I was most insecure about heading into that interview? The only person on earth who knew all of those details was the one currently comforting me. The thought was so monstrous I almost pushed it away again. But this time, it wouldn't leave. This time, her hug felt hollow. The final piece, the thing that took me from a sickening suspicion to an absolute urgent need for proof, was her phone. We were at our favorite coffee shop a week later. She was idly scrolling through her phone, and a message notification banner popped up at the very top of her screen. The name on it was Megan, and the text preview said, "She totally bought it, LOL." It was visible for maybe 2 seconds before she casually swiped it away. But I saw it. I didn't react. I didn't breathe. I just went silent. The kind of profound, ringing silence that comes when your absolute worst fear is confirmed. It was real. This was happening. I went home, and the grief was already starting to set in, but underneath it was a new, cold resolve. I needed proof. Not for her. For me. I needed to know once and for all that I wasn't crazy. I knew I couldn't confront her with just a fleeting glimpse of a text. She'd lie. She'd gaslight me and call me paranoid again. I needed something concrete. Something she couldn't deny. And that's when I thought of Sarah, a mutual friend who had recently worked on a project with Megan. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. Calling her was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt like I was dragging an innocent person into my toxic mess. We met for coffee, and I just laid it all out. The coincidences, the lost job, the text message I saw. As I spoke, I watched her face shift from confusion to a look of dawning, guilty horror. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I was hoping I was wrong," she finally whispered. And then she told me. She'd seen them texting constantly at the office. She'd overheard Megan on the phone, laughing cruelly, showing her screen to other colleagues and saying, "You will not believe what her best friend just told me." Sarah had seen my name. She'd seen the mocking, painfully private details of my life. She confessed she felt sick about it, but was new at the job and scared of causing trouble. Then she took a deep breath. "Megan sent me some screenshots once, bragging about how she was playing you both. I saved them. I think you need to see them." She turned her phone around. And in that instant, my entire world broke. It was all there, in black and white, dozens of messages between Chloe and Megan. It wasn't just idle gossip. It was a calculated, strategic campaign. Chloe would report my insecurities like a spy. "She's terrified she's going to be exposed as a fraud at work." One message from Chloe read. Megan replied, "Perfect, I know exactly how to use that." There was one about my brother. "She's so stressed about having to support him financially." Chloe wrote. Megan's reply, "Good. Let's make sure people at the luncheon know what a saint she has to be." They discussed everything. Every supportive text Chloe had ever sent me flashed in my mind, now tainted and grotesque. Every hug, every "I love you," every moment of comfort was a lie. She wasn't my friend. She was my saboteur. The person I loved like a sister had been holding a knife behind her back for years. I left that coffee shop in a complete daze. It was hard to breathe. 10 years. An entire decade of my life had been built on a foundation of lies. I had to confront her. Not for an explanation, and certainly not for an apology. I knew I'd never get a real one. This was for me. I needed to close this door myself. I texted her to meet at our old park, the one where we'd spent countless summer afternoons. She showed up smiling. That same familiar, bright smile, and the sight of it made my stomach churn with a mixture of grief and rage. I didn't waste any time on small talk. I just looked at her and said, I know everything, Chloe. Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? You're being weird. I know you've been feeding things to Megan. I know you helped her sabotage my promotion. I've seen the messages. The color drained from her face. She looked genuinely shocked. Not that she had done it, but that I had found out. Then, she tried to flip it. One last pathetic time. You went behind my back? You're talking to people about me? Don't, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Don't you dare try that again. It won't work anymore. I saw the screenshots. She totally bought it, LOL. Does that sound familiar? Her face just crumpled, and then came the most twisted, revealing part of all. There was no apology, no remorse. She just looked at me with cold, empty eyes and said, You're being so dramatic. It wasn't that serious. Megan's not that bad once you get to know her. She was trying to reframe a years-long, calculated betrayal as a simple misunderstanding. We're done, Chloe, I said, the words feeling both impossible and liberating. You threw away 10 years. For what? I don't even care anymore. I just want you to know that I see you now. For the very first time, I see who you really are. I stood up and walked away. And for the first time in 10 years, I didn't look back. The next few months were a blur of profound, disorienting pain. It's not a clean break with a friendship like that. It's an amputation. Everywhere I looked, there was a ghost of her. Our coffee shop, our TV shows, our inside jokes, our songs. It felt like a death. I was grieving a person who, I now realized, had never truly existed. The worst part was the insidious self-doubt that crept in. I replayed our entire friendship in my head, searching for clues I'd missed. How could I have been so stupid? So blind? I blamed myself for being too trusting, for being naive. It made me question my own judgment about everything and everyone. I had to block her on every platform, an act that felt both necessary and deeply painful. I had to have a series of quiet, awkward conversations with mutual friends. It was an incredibly lonely period. I pulled away from almost everyone for a while, terrified to let anyone else in. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy and chaotic. It took a lot of therapy to untangle the knot of grief, betrayal, and self-blame. My therapist helped me understand that it wasn't a failure on my part to trust someone who had spent a decade meticulously earning that trust. The fault was not in my trust, but in her deception. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. I leaned on my real friends, the ones who showed up with no agenda. I learned to trust my gut again. That little voice I had dismissed as paranoia? That was my intuition screaming at me to pay attention. I promised myself I would never, ever ignore it again. This whole ordeal was one of the most painful experiences of my life, but it taught me invaluable lessons. And I know I'm not the only one who has gone through this. If you've ever had a friendship detonate like this, or felt like you couldn't trust your own judgment in the aftermath, share your story in the comments. There's so much power in knowing you're not alone in it. And if this resonated with you, and you want to hear more about navigating life's inevitable messes, maybe like and subscribe. So why did she do it? Was it jealousy? A desperate need to feel powerful? A personality disorder? I have spent countless hours turning that question over in my mind. In the end, I realized the why doesn't matter. I will likely never get a true answer, and hunting for one only keeps me tethered to the pain. What matters is what I learned. I learned that 10 years of history means nothing if the loyalty isn't real. I learned that loyalty is about what people do, not just what they say while they're hugging you. Most of all, I learned to trust that feeling deep in my gut when something feels off. Because it usually is. Losing that friendship felt like losing a part of my own identity. But in that empty space, something else finally had room to grow. Self-respect. I learned that I would rather have 2 true, steadfast friends than 100 I wasn't sure about. The betrayal, as devastating as it was, cleared a toxic forest and paved a path for something healthier. It was the end of a long, painful chapter. But it was also the beginning of a new one. One where I know I am strong enough to walk away from anything or anyone that threatens my peace. And that, I've learned, is a lesson that was worth the pain it took to learn it.